We often think of human evolution as happening in a neat, straight line, one species neatly replacing another in an orderly march toward modernity. But the reality is so much more chaotic, so much more fascinating, and so much more human than that tidy picture suggests. Homo heidelbergensis, a remarkable species derived from Homo erectus, first appeared in Africa approximately 1 million years ago. After spreading across the vast African continent, these ancient pioneers ventured outward into Europe and Asia, carrying with them the spark of something extraordinary. The heidelbergensis populations that remained in Africa eventually gave rise to us, Homo sapiens, the species that would one day dominate the planet. Those heidelbergensis groups that migrated to Europe evolved into Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals, perfectly adapted to the harsh, Ice Age conditions of the north. And those that journeyed to Asia evolved into Homo denisova, the Denisovans, another mysterious branch of our family tree that we are only now beginning to understand. But here is the crucial point that changes everything we thought we knew about our past. The appearance of each new species did not lead to the death or extinction of the others. Around 120,000 years ago, at least 6 different species of the genus Homo coexisted on this planet simultaneously. And we are only talking about the species we currently know of. There may have been more. These groups of hominids migrated, joined together, and separated again in patterns that would repeat across millennia. Some of these encounters were probably hostile, driven by competition for territory and resources in an unforgiving world. But others clearly gave rise to families of different species, to children who carried the genetic heritage of both worlds within their very cells. So today, we know with absolute certainty that everyone with Eurasian ancestry shares between 1 and 3% of their genes with the Neanderthals. But discovering this astonishing fact was not an easy process, and the story of how we came to know it is almost as fascinating as the truth itself. In 2010, a group of brilliant scientists from the Max Planck Institute in Germany achieved what many had thought impossible. They sequenced the complete genome of a Neanderthal fossil for the very first time and compared it directly with our own modern human genome. That no Neanderthal fossils were ever found in Africa is a powerful indicator that they interbred with Homo sapiens primarily in Europe and Asia, in the very lands where both species walked the same valleys and shared the same caves. The most accepted theory among researchers is that Homo sapiens would have mixed with Neanderthals between 40 and 60,000 years ago when our ancestors advanced northward from Africa into territories the Neanderthals had called home for hundreds of thousands of years. This hypothesis was dramatically reinforced in 2015 when the genome of the oldest Homo sapiens fossil ever found in Europe was sequenced, and it was discovered to contain between 6 and 9% Neanderthal DNA. That fossil was between 37 and 42,000 years old, placing it squarely in the critical period when our two species were most intimately intertwined. But the story of Neanderthal DNA did not stay confined to Europe and Asia, as scientists once assumed. Contrary to what was long believed, African populations also carry some Neanderthal DNA within their genomes. This likely happened when Homo sapiens, who were themselves the descendants of interbreeding with Neanderthals, migrated back to Africa around 20,000 years ago, carrying those ancient genes with them like living fossils within their bodies. And those genes we inherited from Neanderthals did not merely passively exist within us. They actively contributed to our evolution in ways that scientists are only now beginning to fully appreciate. These inherited genes influence how sensitive our skin is to the sun, determining whether we burn easily or tan deeply, and they influence how our hair grows and what texture it possesses. Features that would have been absolutely essential when adapting to new environments far from the African savannas where Homo sapiens first evolved, and features that may have helped Homo sapiens survive and thrive when they migrated into the colder, darker lands of Europe and Asia. Another positive Neanderthal genetic variant protects women from excessive bleeding during pregnancy and helps prevent spontaneous abortions, a life-saving adaptation that would have been crucial in an era without modern medicine. Other variants play a fascinating role in determining whether we are naturally more active during the day or at night. in psychological traits such as our susceptibility to depression, and even in our propensity to nicotine addiction, a legacy that reaches across tens of thousands of years to touch our modern lives in unexpected ways. But there are also genes that may have been useful in the distant past, yet can harm us today. One striking example is a genetic variant that contributes to faster blood clotting. It may have helped our ancestors heal wounds more quickly in a dangerous world filled with predators and accidents, but now the persistence of this gene increases the risk of dangerous blood clots and strokes in our modern, relatively safe environments. Another groundbreaking study suggests that there is a direct relationship between our Neanderthal genes and our susceptibility to COVID-19. People carrying certain Neanderthal genetic variants may be 2 to 4 times more at risk of becoming seriously ill if they are infected with coronavirus, a connection between our ancient past and our most pressing modern health crisis that nobody could have predicted. Now imagine yourself standing in a dimly lit cave somewhere in Europe, perhaps 45,000 years ago. The air is cold and damp, smelling of earth and smoke from a distant fire. Outside, the Ice Age landscape stretches endlessly, a world of glaciers and tundra that would seem alien to our modern eyes. And in this cave, 2 beings look at each other across the flickering firelight. One is a Neanderthal woman, stocky and powerful, with a prominent brow ridge and a body built for survival in the harshest conditions. The other is a Homo sapiens man recently arrived from Africa, leaner and taller, with a more gracile frame, and a mind full of new ideas. They speak different languages if they speak at all. They come from different worlds, different evolutionary paths that diverged hundreds of thousands of years ago. Yet here they are, sharing the same shelter, the same fire, the same desperate need for warmth and companionship in a hostile world. What passed between them in that cave? Was it love, or loneliness, or something more primal and urgent? We will never know for certain, but the genetic evidence tells us beyond doubt that encounters like this happened, and they happened frequently enough to leave an indelible mark on the human genome. Beyond the genetic legacy, very little is known about what sex was actually like between these 2 species, even whether it was consensual or forced, tender or violent. But there are studies that are beginning to clarify these most intimate and practical questions. In 2017, an anthropologist from Pennsylvania State University identified traces of a type of bacteria that is present in our modern human mouths in the tooth of a Neanderthal fossil. She believes that this bacterium was transferred between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, perhaps because they kissed, sharing not just genes, but moments of genuine intimacy and affection. There are even scientists who think that these 2 species may have exchanged sexually transmitted diseases such as the human papillomavirus and herpes, diseases that would have jumped between species just as readily as beneficial genes did. This same exchange of pathogens may have been one of the contributing factors that led to the Neanderthals disappearing while we survived, a dark irony where the very intimacy that gave us their genes may also have contributed to their demise. The discoveries about interbreeding between species have given new strength to the so-called assimilation theory, which proposes that the Neanderthals were not simply wiped out by superior Homo sapiens, but were gradually absorbed into the much larger Homo sapiens population over time. Since the population of Neanderthals was much smaller than that of the incoming Homo sapiens, numbering perhaps only a few tens of thousands across all of Europe at their peak, they were effectively absorbed into the Homo sapiens community generation by generation. According to this theory, as families of sapiens and Neanderthals merged, as children were born who were neither fully one species nor the other, the distinct Neanderthal species eventually disappeared as a separate population, not through extinction but through incorporation. If you think about it deeply, it is possible to say that the Neanderthals did not become completely extinct in the traditional sense. They are still alive, in a very real way, within each and every one of us who carries their genes. Every time you look in the mirror, some part of what you see was shaped by ancestors who lived in Ice Age caves, who hunted mammoths and woolly rhinoceroses, who survived winters that would kill most modern humans within hours. That is not just a scientific fact, that is a connection to a past so deep and so ancient that it boggles the mind. Now picture yourself walking through a museum of natural history, gazing up at the reconstructed skeleton of a Neanderthal. The bones are thick and robust, the skull heavy with that characteristic brow ridge that seems so alien to our modern sensibilities. For over a century, scientists portrayed Neanderthals as brutish, stupid, and inferior to Homo sapiens, as evolutionary dead ends who were outcompeted and replaced by our superior species. But the genetic revolution of the past 15 years has utterly destroyed that narrative. We now know that Neanderthals were sophisticated toolmakers capable of creating complex weapons and implements from stone and bone. They buried their dead with care and ceremony, suggesting beliefs about the afterlife that mirror our own. They used medicinal plants to treat illnesses and injuries. They made jewelry from eagle talons and shells, indicating aesthetic sensibilities and symbolic thinking that were once thought to be exclusively human. And most profoundly, they made art, leaving behind hand stencils and engravings on cave walls that speak across the ages of minds that were capable of imagination, creativity, and abstract thought. The Neanderthals were not our inferiors, they were our cousins, our partners, and ultimately our ancestors in the most literal genetic sense. The story of how we discovered all of this is itself a tale of scientific perseverance and revolutionary insight. When the first Neanderthal fossils were discovered in the Neander Valley of Germany in 1856, they were immediately dismissed as the remains of a diseased modern human or perhaps a Cossack soldier who had died in the area. It took decades for scientists to accept that these bones represented an entirely different species of human, and even longer to begin understanding their true relationship to us. The breakthrough came with the development of ancient DNA extraction techniques in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. Scientists like Svante Pääbo at the Max Planck Institute spent years perfecting methods to extract genetic material from fossils that were tens of thousands of years old, battling contamination from modern human DNA and the degradation that time inflicts on genetic material. The first draft of the Neanderthal genome, published in 2010, was the culmination of decades of painstaking work, and it revealed something that shocked the scientific world. Neanderthals and modern humans had interbred, and those of us with non-African ancestry carry their genes within us today. But the story does not end with Neanderthals. Around the same time that Homo sapiens were meeting and mating with Neanderthals in Europe, they were also encountering the Denisovans in Asia. The Denisovans are known to us from only a few fragments of bone and teeth discovered in a single cave in Siberia, yet genetic analysis has revealed that they too interbred with Homo sapiens. People from Papua New Guinea and other parts of Oceania carry up to 6% Denisovan DNA, a higher percentage than the Neanderthal DNA found in Eurasians. And there is evidence of yet another ancient human species, one we have not even named yet, whose genes also appear in the DNA of some modern African populations. The human family tree is not a simple line, but a complex web of interconnections, a braided stream where different species flowed together and apart, mixing and separating across hundreds of thousands of years. We are the product of that mixing, the living legacy of encounters between different kinds of humans who looked across campfires at each other and saw not enemies, but potential partners. Now imagine the world as it was 50,000 years ago. The climate was fluctuating wildly, with periods of intense cold followed by brief warmer intervals that allowed forests to reclaim territory from the advancing ice. Human populations were small and scattered, living in bands of perhaps 20 to 50 individuals who moved across the landscape following herds of reindeer, bison, and mammoth. Communication between groups would have been rare and precious, and encountering another band of humans, even if they looked slightly different, would have been an event of enormous significance. Would there have been suspicion and fear? Undoubtedly, but there would also have been curiosity, attraction, and the fundamental human need for companionship and connection. In a world where survival was precarious and the future uncertain, the bonds formed between individuals might have transcended the differences between their species. A Neanderthal woman and a Homo sapiens man might have found in each other something that neither could find within their own groups, a connection that bridged the evolutionary divide between them. The genetic evidence supports this romantic interpretation in surprising ways. When scientists analyzed the Neanderthal DNA present in modern humans, they found that certain regions of the genome were completely devoid of Neanderthal genes. These were primarily regions associated with male fertility and brain function. This suggests that while Neanderthal-human hybrids were viable and fertile overall, there may have been specific incompatibilities that made male hybrids less fertile or that affected brain development in ways that were selected against over time. In other words, natural selection actively shaped which Neanderthal genes survived in our genome and which were eliminated. The genes that remained were those that provided some advantage, whether in immune function, skin pigmentation, metabolism, or other traits that helped Homo sapiens adapt to their new environments. This is not just a story of random mixing. It is a story of selective advantage, of evolutionary pressure shaping the very composition of our genetic heritage. And now we come to one of the most fascinating aspects of this story, one that connects our ancient past to our most pressing modern concerns. The Neanderthal genes that influence our immune system have been shown to affect our susceptibility to a wide range of modern diseases. Some Neanderthal variants provide enhanced protection against certain pathogens, while others increase vulnerability to autoimmune conditions like lupus and Crohn's disease. This makes perfect sense when we consider that Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, developing immune responses to the specific pathogens of those regions. When Homo sapiens arrived from Africa, they would have encountered new diseases against which they had no immunity. By interbreeding with Neanderthals, they acquired genetic defenses against these threats, defenses that were literally a matter of life and death in those ancient times. But those same genetic adaptations can misfire in our modern world, where hygiene and medicine have eliminated many of the threats they were designed to combat, leading to autoimmune disorders, where the immune system attacks the body it is supposed to protect. The implications of this research extend far beyond academic curiosity. They touch on fundamental questions about what it means to be human, about the nature of our species, and our relationship to the other beings who once shared this planet with us. For most of human history, we have defined ourselves in opposition to others, drawing sharp boundaries between us and them, between human and non-human, between civilized and primitive. But the genetic evidence tells a different story. It tells us that those boundaries were always more permeable than we imagined, that the distinctions between species were never as absolute as we believed. We are not pure products of a single evolutionary line. We are mongrels, hybrids, the children of unions between different kinds of humans who found each other across the vast distances of time and space. And in that mongrel heritage lies not weakness, but strength, not confusion, but richness, a genetic diversity that has helped us survive and thrive in virtually every environment on Earth. Now let us return to that Ice Age world and consider what daily life might have been like for these ancient humans who carried within them the genes of multiple species. The winters were brutally cold, with temperatures plunging far below anything most modern humans have ever experienced. Food was scarce and unpredictable, requiring constant movement and adaptation. Predators like cave bears, saber-toothed cats, and wolves posed constant threats. In this world, the differences between Neanderthal and Homo sapiens might have seemed trivial compared to the shared challenges they faced. Both species needed shelter, warmth, food, and safety. Both species felt love and loss, hope and fear. Both species looked up at the same stars and wondered about their place in the universe. And when a Neanderthal woman took a Homo sapiens man into her arms, or vice versa, they were not just two different species coming together. They were two human beings seeking connection in a hostile world, finding in each other the warmth and comfort that all living creatures crave. The archaeological evidence for this intimacy is growing stronger with each passing year. At sites across Europe and Asia, scientists have found tools and artifacts that show clear blending of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens technologies, suggesting not just trade but cohabitation and shared ways of life. At the Grotte du Renne in France, jewelry and tools show a mix of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens styles that cannot be explained by simple exchange. At other sites, hearths, and living spaces show evidence of both species occupying the same caves at the same time, not as competitors, but as companions. The famous Cave of the Hands in Spain contains hand stencils that some researchers believe were made by Neanderthals, demonstrating artistic expression that was once thought to be the exclusive domain of Homo sapiens. And at the site of Shanidar in Iraq, a Neanderthal skeleton was found buried with flowers, suggesting ritual behavior and emotional depth that rivals anything we see in our own species. But the most powerful evidence remains the genetic code written within our own cells. Every person of non-African descent carries within them approximately 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, a legacy that amounts to hundreds of millions of base pairs of genetic information. For people of East Asian descent, the percentage is slightly higher than for Europeans, suggesting that the interbreeding happened in multiple waves and locations across the ancient world. And for people with ancestry from Papua New Guinea and nearby regions, the Denisovan contribution adds another layer of complexity to their genetic heritage. Even Africans, long thought to be free of archaic human DNA, have been found to carry small amounts of Neanderthal genetic material, likely introduced by Homo sapiens who migrated back to Africa from Eurasia, carrying their mixed heritage with them. There is no pure human genome. There is no unmixed ancestry. We are all, every one of us, the children of multiple human species. And now we must confront the most profound implication of all this research. If Neanderthals and Homo sapiens could interbreed and produce fertile offspring, were they truly separate species at all? The classical biological definition of species, which states that different species cannot produce fertile offspring, would suggest that they were not. Yet Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were clearly distinct in their anatomy, their genetics, and their evolutionary histories. They represent what biologists call a species complex, a group of closely related populations that are in the process of diverging from each other but have not yet completed that divergence. In this sense, the interbreeding between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens was not an anomaly or a mistake. It was a natural consequence of their close evolutionary relationship, a relationship that was closer than that between many populations that we today classify as members of the same species. The boundaries between species are not walls but gradients, not absolute divisions but fuzzy edges where one form gradually transitions into another. This insight has revolutionary implications for how we think about human diversity today. Just as Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were not as different as we once believed, so too are the various populations of modern humans more similar than different at the genetic level. We share 99.9% of our DNA with every other human being on Earth, regardless of their ancestry or appearance. The differences that seem so significant to us, the variations in skin color, hair texture, and facial features, represent only a tiny fraction of our genetic code. And beneath those superficial differences lies a shared heritage that stretches back to the African origins of our species, a heritage that includes contributions from Neanderthals, Denisovans, and perhaps other ancient humans whose names we do not yet know. We are all Africans in our deepest ancestry, and we are all hybrids in our more recent past. The concept of racial purity, of distinct human types that have remained separate throughout history, is not just morally wrong, it is scientifically false. Now let us consider the specific ways in which Neanderthal genes have influenced our modern lives, for the effects of this ancient interbreeding are not merely historical curiosities. They actively shape who we are and how we experience the world today. The Neanderthal variants that affect skin and hair pigmentation have been linked to our risk of sunburn and skin cancer, influencing how we must protect ourselves from the sun's rays. Variants associated with metabolism affect how we process fats and sugars, potentially influencing our risk of obesity and diabetes in our modern world of abundant food. Genes related to sleep patterns may explain why some of us are natural early risers, while others are night owls, a variation that would have been advantageous in ancient communities where someone always needed to keep watch. And the genetic variants that influence our immune responses continue to affect our susceptibility to infectious diseases, from the common cold to COVID-19, in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. The story of how these genes were discovered is a masterclass in scientific detective work. When the first Neanderthal genome was sequenced, researchers immediately began comparing it to the genomes of modern humans from different parts of the world. They expected to find no overlap, confirming the traditional view that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were completely separate species. Instead, they found that non-African genomes contained small but consistent segments of Neanderthal DNA, segments that were absent in African genomes. This was the smoking gun that proved interbreeding had occurred, but the real work had only just begun. Scientists then had to determine which specific genes had been inherited from Neanderthals and what functions those genes performed. This required analyzing the genomes of thousands of modern humans, comparing their Neanderthal DNA segments to their physical traits, medical histories, and genetic markers. The results have been astonishing, revealing connections between our ancient heritage and our modern lives that nobody could have predicted. One of the most surprising findings concerns the Neanderthal genes that influence our risk of severe COVID-19. In 2020, as the pandemic was sweeping the globe, researchers discovered that a specific stretch of DNA on chromosome 3 was strongly associated with severe illness and hospitalization from COVID-19. This stretch of DNA, which increases the risk of severe disease by 2 to 4 times, was found to have been inherited from Neanderthals. It is present in about 16% of Europeans and 50% of South Asians, explaining why some populations seemed more vulnerable to the virus than others. This discovery was shocking not just because of its medical implications, but because of what it revealed about the enduring power of our ancient genetic heritage. A gene variant that evolved in Neanderthals hundreds of thousands of years ago, long before humans had even developed agriculture or writing, was determining who lived and who died in a 21st century pandemic. The past, it seems, is never truly past. It lives within us, shaping our present in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. And now let us turn to the emotional and philosophical dimensions of this story, for science without meaning is merely data, and data without story is merely noise. The discovery that we carry Neanderthal genes within us has fundamentally changed how we think about our place in the natural world. For centuries, we defined humanity in opposition to nature, setting ourselves apart from all other creatures as uniquely endowed with reason, language, and culture. We were Homo sapiens, the wise ones, the only species capable of true thought and feeling. But if we carry within us the genes of another human species, if our ancestors loved and lived with beings who were not quite like us, then that sharp distinction begins to blur. The Neanderthals were not animals, they were not subhuman. They were a different kind of human, with their own wisdom, their own culture, their own way of being in the world. And through our genetic connection to them, we inherit not just their biology, but something of their essence, their way of encountering the world that shaped our own. Consider the implications for how we treat each other today. If the boundaries between ancient human species were permeable, if Neanderthals and Homo sapiens could recognize each other as kindred beings despite their differences, then what does that say about the boundaries we draw between ourselves today? The genetic differences between modern human populations are trivial compared to the differences between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. Yet we have used those trivial differences to justify slavery, genocide, and discrimination on a massive scale. Perhaps the lesson of our Neanderthal heritage is that difference is not division, that diversity is not danger, that the other is not the enemy. Perhaps the very fact that we are all hybrids, all mixtures of different ancestral streams, should remind us that our common humanity far outweighs our superficial differences. We are all, in the deepest sense, family. The archaeological record continues to yield new surprises that support this interpretation. In 2022, researchers announced the discovery of the first known child who had a Neanderthal mother and a Homo sapiens father, found in a cave in Italy. The child, who lived approximately 55,000 years ago, was buried with care and ceremony, surrounded by offerings that suggest the community mourned their passing. This discovery is extraordinary not just because it proves that Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrids existed, which we already knew from genetics, but because it shows that these hybrids were accepted members of their communities. They were not outcasts or freaks, they were children who were loved and mourned, who belonged to families and communities that valued them as individuals. The social barriers between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, if they existed at all, were clearly not insurmountable. Love, it seems, truly does conquer all, even the boundaries between species. And now we must consider the ultimate fate of the Neanderthals, for their story is not just one of genetic contribution, but also of disappearance. Around 40,000 years ago, the last known Neanderthals vanished from the fossil record. Their extinction has been attributed to many factors: competition with Homo sapiens, climate change, disease, and now the assimilation theory that suggests they were absorbed rather than eliminated. But whatever the cause, their disappearance marks the end of an era in human evolution, a time when multiple human species coexisted and interacted on this planet. After the Neanderthals were gone, Homo sapiens stood alone as the sole surviving member of the genus Homo, a distinction we hold to this day. But as we have seen, we are not as alone as we once believed. The Neanderthals live on within us, their genes expressing themselves in our skin and hair, our immune systems and our brains, our susceptibility to disease and our patterns of sleep. The story of human evolution is thus not a simple tale of progress and replacement, but a complex narrative of interaction and integration. We did not simply outcompete the Neanderthals and replace them. We met them, learned from them, loved them, and ultimately became them in part, just as they became us. The genetic legacy they left behind is not a foreign intrusion into our genome, but an integral part of what makes us human. Without those Neanderthal genes, we might not have survived the challenges of the Ice Age, might not have developed the adaptations that allowed us to thrive in environments far from our African homeland, might not have become the globally dominant species we are today. In a very real sense, we owe our success as a species to the genetic contributions of our Neanderthal cousins. And so we come to the present day, standing at the threshold of new discoveries that promise to reveal even more about our ancient heritage. Scientists are now developing techniques to read ancient DNA from sediments, allowing them to reconstruct the genetic history of entire ecosystems without needing to find actual fossils. They are using artificial intelligence to predict the three-dimensional structure of ancient proteins, revealing how Neanderthal biology functioned at the molecular level. And they are comparing Neanderthal genomes to those of modern humans with unprecedented precision, identifying specific genetic variants that influence everything from our risk of schizophrenia to our ability to taste certain flavors. The golden age of ancient DNA research is just beginning, and the discoveries of the next decade may dwarf those of the past 15 years in their significance and surprise. But beyond the science, beyond the genetics and the archaeology, lies a deeper truth that this story reveals about the nature of humanity itself. We are not pure. We are not separate. We are not the product of a single, unbroken line of descent from some idealized ancestral type. We are the result of mixing, of meeting, of merging between different kinds of humans who found in each other something worth preserving. Our strength as a species lies not in our purity but in our diversity, not in our separation from nature but in our connection to it, not in our uniqueness but in our relatedness to all living things. The Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and perhaps other ancient humans whose names we do not yet know, all contributed to the genetic mosaic that makes each of us who we are. We are walking archives of human history, carrying within ourselves the stories of encounters that happened tens of thousands of years ago, of loves and losses, of migrations and meetings, of survival and adaptation in a world that was constantly changing. Now imagine yourself looking into the eyes of a stranger on a crowded street. They might have different colored skin, different shaped eyes, different textured hair. But beneath those surface differences, you share a common heritage that stretches back to the African origins of our species. And within both of you, if you have any non-African ancestry, lie the same Neanderthal genes, the same ancient legacy from a time when two kinds of humans became one. In that shared genetic heritage lies a bond that transcends all the artificial divisions we have created between ourselves. We are all, quite literally, family. And our family tree is far more complex, far more interesting, and far more beautiful than we ever imagined. The implications of this research extend into the future as well. As we develop new genetic therapies and personalized medicine, understanding our Neanderthal heritage becomes not just academically interesting, but medically crucial. A treatment that works well for someone with high levels of Neanderthal DNA might not work as well for someone with low levels. A drug that is safe for most people might cause adverse reactions in those who carry specific Neanderthal variants. Our ancient genetic heritage is not just a matter of historical curiosity. It is a living, breathing part of our biology that affects our health and well-being every single day. The more we learn about it, the better equipped we will be to develop treatments that take our individual genetic histories into account, ushering in an era of truly personalized medicine that honors the full complexity of our ancestral heritage. And so we return to the question with which we began: how did sex with Neanderthals change us forever? The answer is both simple and profound. It changed us by making us who we are. Every aspect of our biology that bears the imprint of Neanderthal genes, from our skin and hair to our immune systems and our brains, is a testament to the power of that ancient intimacy. We are not the pure products of a single evolutionary line, but the living legacy of encounters between different kinds of humans who found in each other something worth preserving. Our Neanderthal heritage is not a foreign intrusion into our genome, but an integral part of what makes us human. It connects us to a past that is far deeper and far more fascinating than we ever imagined, a past in which multiple human species walked the earth together, learned from each other, loved each other, and ultimately became each other in the most intimate way possible. And now, as we come to the end of this magnificent journey through our ancient past, let us take a moment to reflect on what we have learned together. We started with a simple question about how sex with Neanderthals changed us, and we have traveled through millions of years of human evolution across continents and climates, through scientific discoveries and philosophical reflections. We have met the Neanderthals not as primitive brutes, but as sophisticated beings who buried their dead with care, created art and jewelry, used medicinal plants, and ultimately gave us the genetic gifts that helped us survive and thrive in a hostile world. We have seen how the boundaries between species are not walls but gradients, how difference is not division, and how the connections between living beings can transcend the categories we impose upon them. We have learned that we are all, every one of us, the children of multiple human species, carrying within ourselves the legacy of encounters that happened tens of thousands of years ago. Sharing this story with you has been an incredible privilege, and I hope it has touched your heart and expanded your mind as much as it has mine. Every time I delve into the research, every time I read about a new discovery, I'm amazed anew at the complexity and beauty of our shared human story. And without you, my valued viewers, telling these stories would not be nearly as meaningful. I research for you, I write for you, I narrate for you. Your engagement, your comments, your shares, they all fuel my passion for bringing these ancient tales to life. And I am grateful beyond words for the community we have built together, a community of curious minds and open hearts who believe that understanding our past is the key to building a better future. We learn so much from this story. We see that even the greatest mysteries of our biology are born from humble beginnings, from encounters between individuals who could not have known that their unions would shape the future of an entire species. We understand that nothing in evolution is permanent, that species arise and change and merge in patterns that defy our simple categories. We realize that the power of life lies not in isolation, but in connection, not in purity, but in diversity, not in separation, but in the courage to reach across boundaries and find common ground. And most importantly, we learn that the past is never truly past. It lives within us, shaping our present and our future in ways we are only beginning to understand. Those who do not know their past cannot build their future, and those who do not honor their ancestors cannot know themselves. If this journey made you feel something, if this story touched your heart and expanded your understanding, of what it means to be human. Please subscribe to this channel. It takes just 1 second, but the value I will give you in return is truly infinite. Because this is not just one video, this is the beginning of a series, a journey through the hidden stories of our past that will transform how you see yourself and your place in the world. Every day, a new story. Every day, a new epic. The unknown stories of ancient civilizations, the secret lives of our evolutionary cousins, the darkest mysteries and brightest triumphs of human history, all coming soon to this channel. And you do not want to miss them. We have built a family of curious minds and open hearts here, and I would love for you to become part of it. And now I have a request for you. Please write in the comments which part of this story affected you the most. Was it the discovery of the first Neanderthal genome? The image of ancient humans finding love across species boundaries? The realization that we carry our ancient past within our very cells? Or perhaps the connection between Neanderthal genes and modern diseases like COVID-19? I read every single comment, and your thoughts and reactions help me understand what resonates with you and what I should explore in future videos, because I am preparing the next video based on your feedback. Yes, you heard that right. The next topic will be influenced by your comments and suggestions. So, your voice matters, your engagement matters. You are not just a viewer, you are a collaborator in this grand project of understanding our shared human story. And let me tell you a secret. In my next video, I am going to tell you a story you have never heard before, something that is not in the standard history books that nobody talks about, but that is incredibly exciting and deeply moving. Want a hint? I will just say this. Deep in a cave, hidden for 40,000 years, lies evidence of a mind as complex and creative as our own, a mind that dreamed and imagined and created art that still has the power to move us today. Curious now, are you not? So subscribe and hit the notification bell so you do not miss it, because this story is going to change how you think about intelligence, creativity, and what it means to be human. This channel is not just a history channel, it is a family. In the comments, you talk to each other, debate, share your thoughts and insights, correct me when I am wrong, and teach me things I did not know. I read every single comment, and I try to respond to as many as I can, because this channel is yours. These stories are yours, and together we will grow even bigger, even wiser, even more connected to the incredible tapestry of human history that stretches behind us and before us. I do not know what time it is where you are right now. Maybe it is midnight and you're about to fall asleep, carrying the echoes of this story into your dreams. Maybe it is early morning and you are drinking your coffee, starting your day with a new perspective on who you are and where you came from. Maybe it is afternoon and you are taking a break from work, seeking a moment of wonder in a busy day. Maybe it is evening and you are sharing this story with someone you love, passing on the knowledge that connects us all. Wherever you are, whenever you are listening, know that I am here for you. Every day, a new story. Every night, a new epic. Thank you for sharing your time with me, for being with me on this long and magnificent journey through our shared past. Good night to all of you, sweet dreams, beautiful visions, and until we meet again in another story, on another night, in another epic, take care. God bless you all. Let us now venture deeper into the specific genetic mechanisms that made this interbreeding possible, for the science behind hybridization is as fascinating as the historical narrative itself. When two distinct species mate, their offspring typically face what biologists call hybrid incompatibility, a suite of genetic problems that can render the offspring sterile, sick, or non-viable. This is why mules, the offspring of horses and donkeys, are almost always sterile. The genetic differences between the parent species are too great to allow for the proper functioning of the hybrid's reproductive system. But Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were different. Their evolutionary divergence, while significant enough to produce visible anatomical differences, was not so great as to create insurmountable reproductive barriers. They had separated from their common ancestor, Homo heidelbergensis, only a few 100,000 years earlier, a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. Their chromosomes could still pair properly during meiosis. their genes could still work together to produce functional proteins, and their offspring could still grow into healthy adults who were themselves capable of reproduction. This relatively recent shared ancestry is what made the entire story of Neanderthal Homo sapiens interbreeding possible, and it is what allowed the genetic legacy of the Neanderthals to persist within our genome across tens of thousands of years. The specific genes that were inherited from Neanderthals and retained in modern human populations tell their own compelling story about what traits were advantageous in the ancient world. One of the most significant clusters of Neanderthal genes in modern humans is located on chromosome 6, in a region known as the Major Histocompatibility Complex, or MHC. This region contains hundreds of genes that are crucial for immune function, determining how our bodies recognize and respond to pathogens. The Neanderthal versions of these genes provided modern humans with new tools in their immunological arsenal, variants that had been honed by hundreds of thousands of years of exposure to the specific pathogens of Europe and Asia. When Homo sapiens arrived from Africa, they would have encountered diseases against which they had no natural immunity, diseases that had been co-evolving with Neanderthals for millennia. By acquiring Neanderthal MHC genes through interbreeding, our ancestors gained a head start in this immunological arms race, a genetic advantage that may have been the difference between survival and extinction in those critical early millennia of expansion. But the immune system is a double-edged sword, and the very genes that protected our ancestors from ancient pathogens can cause problems in our modern world. Autoimmune diseases, conditions in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the body's own tissues, have been linked to specific Neanderthal genetic variants. Rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, and type 1 diabetes all show associations with Neanderthal DNA in modern human populations. This makes sense when we consider that these diseases represent an overactive immune response, a system that is too aggressive rather than too weak. In the ancient world, where infectious diseases were a constant and deadly threat, an overactive immune system might have been an advantage, providing robust protection against pathogens at the cost of occasional friendly fire against the body's own tissues. But in our modern world, where hygiene, antibiotics, and vaccines have dramatically reduced the threat from infectious diseases, that same overactive immune system becomes more liability than asset, causing chronic inflammation and autoimmune disorders that affect millions of people worldwide. Our Neanderthal heritage, in other words, is a mixed blessing, a genetic gift that comes with its own costs and complications. The genetic variants that influence our skin and hair also tell a fascinating story about adaptation and migration. The Neanderthal versions of genes like BNC2 and MC1 affect skin pigmentation, with some variants associated with lighter skin and others with darker skin. This variation reflects the complex patterns of migration and interbreeding that occurred across the ancient world, as different populations of Homo sapiens encountered different populations of Neanderthals in different environments. In Europe, where sunlight was weaker and vitamin D deficiency was a serious risk, lighter skin would have been advantageous, allowing for more efficient synthesis of vitamin D from limited sunlight. In other regions, darker skin would have provided protection against the harmful effects of ultraviolet radiation. The patchwork of Neanderthal skin pigmentation genes in modern human populations thus reflects the complex mosaic of ancient encounters, a genetic tapestry woven from thousands of individual meetings between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens across tens of thousands of years and thousands of miles. The story of Neanderthal genes and brain function is perhaps the most controversial and fascinating area of research. Early studies suggested that Neanderthal DNA was largely absent from regions of the genome associated with brain development, leading some researchers to speculate that Neanderthal brain genes were incompatible with Homo sapiens cognition and were therefore selected against. But more recent research has painted a more nuanced picture. While it is true that some brain-related regions show reduced Neanderthal ancestry, others show significant Neanderthal contribution. Genes involved in neuron development, synaptic function, and even aspects of behavior and personality show evidence of Neanderthal influence in modern humans. The relationship between Neanderthal brain genes and modern cognition is complex, with some variants associated with increased risk of conditions like depression and addiction, while others may influence traits like creativity and problem-solving. The brain is the most complex organ in the human body, and its genetic architecture is correspondingly intricate. Unraveling the specific contributions of Neanderthal genes to modern brain function remains one of the great frontiers of human genetics, a mystery that promises to yield surprising insights in the years to come. Now let us consider the social and cultural dimensions of Neanderthal Homo sapiens encounters, for these ancient meetings were not merely biological events but social and cultural ones as well. When two groups of humans meet, whether they are members of the same species or different ones, the encounter is shaped by a complex web of social factors. Language, or the lack thereof, would have been a significant barrier, but not necessarily an insurmountable one. Neanderthals possessed the FOXP2 gene, which is crucial for language development in modern humans, and their hyoid bones, which support the tongue and are essential for speech, were virtually identical to ours. They may well have had language, perhaps different from ours, but no less complex and expressive. And even without shared language, humans have always found ways to communicate. Gestures, facial expressions, body language, and shared activities like hunting, cooking, and caring for children can bridge enormous cultural and linguistic gaps. The archaeological evidence suggests that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens did engage in shared activities, using similar tools, exploiting similar resources, and occupying the same spaces. These shared activities would have provided ample opportunities for social bonding, for the development of trust and affection, and ultimately for the intimate encounters that left their genetic mark on our genome. The question of whether Neanderthal Homo sapiens sexual encounters were consensual or coercive is one that haunts this research, and it is a question that we may never be able to answer definitively. The genetic evidence tells us that interbreeding occurred, but it cannot tell us the circumstances under which it occurred. Were these unions born of love and mutual attraction, or were they the result of violence and domination? The archaeological record offers some clues, but they are ambiguous at best. The fact that Neanderthal DNA was passed down through generations suggests that at least some of the offspring of these unions were accepted and raised within their communities, which might argue for consensual relationships. The discovery of the Neanderthal Homo sapiens hybrid child buried with ceremony in Italy also suggests that these children were valued members of their societies, but we cannot rule out the possibility that some encounters were coercive, as sexual violence has been a tragic constant throughout human history. The truth, as is so often the case, likely lies somewhere in between, with a mixture of consensual unions and coercive encounters shaping the genetic legacy we carry today. The assimilation theory, which proposes that Neanderthals were gradually absorbed into the larger Homo sapiens population rather than driven to extinction, has gained significant support from recent genetic and archaeological research. This theory suggests that the disappearance of Neanderthals as a distinct population was not a sudden event but a gradual process that occurred over many generations. As Homo sapiens populations expanded into Neanderthal territories, the two species would have increasingly come into contact, interbred, and merged. Over time, the smaller Neanderthal population would have been genetically swamped by the much larger Homo sapiens population, with Neanderthal traits becoming increasingly diluted until they were no longer visible in the archaeological record. But their genes would have persisted, carried forward in the genomes of their hybrid descendants, a hidden legacy that would only be revealed tens of thousands of years later by the tools of modern genetics. This process of assimilation is not unique to Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. It is a common pattern in evolution, one that has played out countless times as species come into contact, interbreed, and merge. The timeline of Neanderthal disappearance is also more complex than was once believed. For decades, scientists thought that Neanderthals vanished around 40,000 years ago, replaced by the superior Homo sapiens in a relatively short period of time. But recent discoveries have pushed back the date of the last known Neanderthals, with some evidence suggesting that small populations may have survived in isolated refuges until as recently as 30,000 years ago, or even later. These late surviving Neanderthals would have lived in a world that was already dominated by Homo sapiens, occupying marginal territories and maintaining their distinct way of life in the face of overwhelming pressure from the expanding modern human population. Their eventual disappearance, whether through assimilation or extinction, marks the end of an era in human evolution, a time when our planet was home to multiple human species living side by side. After they were gone, Homo sapiens stood alone, the sole surviving representative of a genus that had once been diverse and widespread. But even in their disappearance, the Neanderthals left a legacy that continues to shape our world. Their genes influence our health, our appearance, our behavior, and our susceptibility to disease in ways that scientists are only beginning to understand. Their story challenges our assumptions about what it means to be human, about the boundaries between species, and about the nature of evolution itself. And their memory, preserved in our DNA and in the archaeological record, serves as a powerful reminder of the complexity and diversity of the human family tree. We are not the pure products of a single evolutionary line, but the living legacy of encounters between different kinds of humans who found in each other something worth preserving. Our Neanderthal heritage is not a foreign intrusion into our genome, but an integral part of what makes us human, a connection to a past that is far deeper and far more fascinating than we ever imagined. The ongoing research into ancient human DNA promises to reveal even more about our Neanderthal heritage in the coming years. Scientists are now able to extract DNA from increasingly ancient and degraded samples, pushing back the frontier of what is possible in paleogenetics. They are developing new techniques to read the epigenetic marks on ancient DNA, revealing how genes were regulated in ancient humans and how that regulation differed from our own. And they are using advanced computational methods to reconstruct the three-dimensional structure of ancient genomes, providing insights into how Neanderthal chromosomes were organized and how that organization influenced gene function. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, another chapter to the story of how our ancient ancestors lived, loved, and left their genetic mark on the modern world. As we stand on the threshold of these new discoveries, it is worth reflecting on how far we have come in our understanding of human evolution. Just 20 years ago, the idea that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens had interbred was considered fringe science, dismissed by many mainstream researchers as speculative and unsupported by evidence. Today, it is accepted as scientific fact, supported by overwhelming genetic evidence and increasingly supported by archaeological discoveries. This rapid shift in our understanding is a testament to the power of new technologies and new ways of thinking, and it is a reminder that science is always provisional, always open to revision in the light of new evidence. The story of Neanderthal Homo sapiens interbreeding is not just a story about our past. It is a story about the nature of scientific discovery itself, about how our understanding of the world can be transformed by a single breakthrough, and about how the most radical ideas can become accepted truth when the evidence demands it. And so we return, one final time, to that Ice Age world where two kinds of humans looked across the flickering firelight at each other and saw not enemies but potential partners. We will never know their names, never hear their stories in their own words, never understand the full complexity of their thoughts and feelings. But through the genetic legacy they left behind, we can catch glimpses of their world, echoes of their lives, fragments of a story that is still being written in the cells of every person who carries their genes. They are not gone, they are here within us, shaping who we are and who we will become. And in that genetic connection lies a bond that transcends time, a bridge between past and present that reminds us that we are all, every one of us, part of a story that is far bigger and far more beautiful than we can ever fully comprehend. The legacy of Neanderthal interbreeding also raises profound questions about the future of our species. As we develop ever more powerful genetic technologies, we are gaining the ability to read, edit, and even rewrite our own genetic code. The CRISPR revolution has made it possible to make precise changes to specific genes, raising the possibility of eliminating disease-causing variants or enhancing desirable traits. But as we contemplate these possibilities, we must also consider the wisdom encoded in our ancient genetic heritage. The Neanderthal genes that increase our risk of certain diseases may also protect us from others. The variants that influence our sleep patterns, our immune responses, our metabolism, all represent evolutionary solutions to ancient challenges that may still be relevant today. Before we rush to edit our genomes, we should seek to understand the full complexity of our genetic heritage, including the contributions of our Neanderthal ancestors. Their genes are not obsolete relics of a bygone era, but living adaptations that continue to shape our biology in ways we are only beginning to understand. The story of how sex with Neanderthals changed us forever is ultimately a story about connection. It is about how two different kinds of humans, separated by hundreds of thousands of years of independent evolution, found in each other something worth preserving. It is about how the boundaries between species are not absolute but permeable, how difference is not division, and how the connections between living beings can transcend the categories we impose upon them. And it is about how the past lives within us, shaping our present and our future in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. We are not pure products of a single evolutionary line, but the living legacy of encounters between different kinds of humans who found in each other the courage to reach across boundaries and find common ground. In that legacy lies not weakness but strength, not confusion but richness, a genetic diversity that has helped us survive and thrive in virtually every environment on Earth. And as we conclude this journey through our ancient past, let us carry forward the lessons that the Neanderthals teach us. Let us remember that difference is not division, that diversity is not danger, and that the other is not the enemy. Let us honor the genetic heritage they left behind, not as a foreign intrusion, but as an integral part of what makes us human. And let us look forward to the discoveries that await us, knowing that each new finding adds another chapter to the incredible story of who we are and where we came from. The Neanderthals may be gone from this world, but they live on within us, their genes expressing themselves in our skin and hair, our immune systems and our brains, our susceptibility to disease and our patterns of sleep. They are still here, still shaping us, still reminding us that we are part of a story that stretches back millions of years and forward into an unknown future. And that story, our story, is far from over.